The sun shone and people died. This was London over the long holiday weekend, a city where the number of killings has gone up by 44% in the last year. Are austerity cuts causing the rise in crime? Who is responsible for the recent spate of violence? You're watching Roundtable with me, David Foster. There's been a cut of 20% in the number of police in the UK. London's Mayor Sadiq Khan says the London force is overstretched and under-resourced. But is blaming austerity perhaps the easy way out? Are there other reasons for a surge in knife and gun crime?
Britain's capital is seeing a massive rise in violent crime. Gun and knife crime is at an all-time high. Young people are losing their lives on the streets of London.
So the kids have got nowhere to go around here. That's why they're standing on the street corners. What else are they going to do?
Never ends. Never. Never ends.
Youngsters losing their lives like this, it doesn't make sense. It's no good at all.
If this was cats and dogs getting shot, I bet you there would be an uproar bigger than what's going on now.
In February and March this year, London had a higher murder rate than New York, and that shocked a lot of people. But for those working on the ground here, it hasn't come as a surprise. They say cuts made to youth services and community projects as part of government austerity measures has exacerbated the problem of violent crime. One of the hotspots for crime has been North London, not far from Tottenham Hotspur football stadium. There's been a battle taking place, separated by a stretch of road and a postcode. Lordship Lane runs between Tottenham and Wood Green. Gangs from the N17 and N22 areas are engaged in a conflict. Nana Agiman works with young people in the area trying to reduce violence.
This general level of poverty is still there, and that's never been resolved. And that's the reason why these issues keep on coming back up again. So we're heading to Northumberland Park, just to show you where the young lady was killed in a crossfire.
17-year-old Tanisha Melbourne Blake was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She wasn't involved in any gangs or a part of this turf war. Young groups of men from the different areas in North London post well-produced videos on YouTube. They brazenly talk about wanting to kill each other. Lamps, as he was known, was shot and killed when he left a cinema in Wood Green. His real name was Kelvin Odunoyi, and he was just 19 years old. His friends are still angry and want revenge. One of them spoke to us but wanted his identity hidden.
They took our brother away, so it's serious now.
So you're saying that if anyone comes to your area from a different area, right, because of what happened to your friend, so they're automatically a target?
Anyone. Anyone's a target. Anyone that try to cut through our bits, like our ends.
Your area? Our
area can get it, because you get me, they took away our brother, like.
Get what? What do you mean get it? Get what?
Bro, you can get chefed up, like.
Get
chefed up, my brother.
What do you mean chefed up?
Anything. Killed? I'm trying to killed.
From March 2017 to 2018, murders in London went up by 44%. Stabbings went up by 5.7%. And there was over 30,000 violent muggings. That's equivalent to 83 a day. Is austerity really a factor in the increase of violent crime?
So when we think about what leads to violent crime, particularly crime among young people, is the reduction in the kind of preventative measures to getting young people off the streets and away from violent crime. We can see that there's certainly, I think the predictable consequence is likely to be an increase in these types of crimes when we see this kind of erosion of public services.
Some have called for more policing, others for harsher sentencing for violent offenders. But what we've heard from people working on the streets of London is there needs to be greater investment in preventing young people picking up knives and guns.
Very pleased to say that at the round table today we have Ben Harris-Quinney, Chairman and Research Fellow at the Bow Group, the Conservative Bow Group. Justin Finlayson, London bus driver, whose project United Borders aims to break down some of the postcode rivalries we heard about in that reported piece. We have Rakin Fatuga, director of Save Our Boys, a mentorship program for young offenders that also educates parents about life on the streets, and Dal Babu, former chief superintendent for the Metropolitan Police. Thank you very much for coming in. Going back to something that the US president said just before the weekend, that London, he'd been told, resembled, or certainly some of the hospitals resembled, a war zone. He was ridiculed for it, but to some extent, I mean, it has become like a battleground, hasn't it?
It has, in a way, not 100%, because, you know, we haven't got hundreds and hundreds of people being killed, but there are, the numbers of people being killed is so high at the moment. I mean, I think it's now we're at 60 deaths. I think we've reached 60 deaths in London, and this has never been so high. So it is really terrible. I think social media has got a massive thing to do with this as well, because now everything, when something happens, it's on social media, okay, it gets hyped up. The gangs actually are using social media as well. Okay, so
but why has it got so bad? We're not going to end social media. Why do you think it's got to the level it has got? Because the question we're asking is, have the cuts, the inevitable cuts of the last 10 years, some would argue, been to blame for this? Well, you're a policeman. What do you think?
Well, I think you can't. It's very, very interesting, because what you hear politicians saying, nothing to do with cuts. And then as soon as you have this crisis in the number of deaths, I think it's about 64 at the moment, then you basically have additional police resources. So, for example, in Harrow, where I was a borough commander, after the two young men...
Harrow, for those that don't know, that's North London.
North London, and it was where a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old were shot by a drive-by shooting. Now, when I was borough commander there, we had, in each of the wards, political wards, you would have 6 people that were there permanently. Now, you're down to 2. Confidence at that time, when I was borough commander, was 82. The confidence that the public had in the police was 82%. Now it's 54%. So I think all of these are linked with austerity. And what's the first thing the government does when we have these kind of crises? It says we can have more police on the streets. So the bank holiday, we actually had more police resources, more feet on the beat because of what had happened. So I think there's a clear link between austerity. And I think the final point I'd make is around what Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, said. She said at the Police Federation conference, when the Police Federation says we're very, very concerned about crime going up when you keep on cutting police numbers, Theresa May, in a very, very famous clip, says, "You're crying wolf." Well, actually, the chickens have come home to roost now.
But the interesting thing here is that, OK, more police might prevent some crimes from being committed, but it doesn't necessarily change social attitudes. It doesn't make people think differently, does it?
I'd have to add to that. I mean,
with you in a second, Ben. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm from Harrow as well.
Yeah.
And recently, my son obviously was stabbed in Rayner's Lane, which ain't too far from Harrow. And people say, is it just the cuts alone? I think it is the cuts, but we also have a class issue. There are the people in London who are affected by, you know, the class issue are going to be predominantly people from ethnic backdrops. So when there are cuts, we're the first to display what those cuts actually lead to. In terms of the violence, what have you not, myself, who's, I'd say, middle class, you know, had a partner that worked in banking and all the rest of it. So these kind of issues, the hotbed issues, we shouldn't be around it. We moved away from it. We're in Harrow, right? But it just
should explain that it is a relatively affluent part of North.
Yeah. It's all right. You know, the issues that affect other boroughs doesn't really quite happen there. But again, our son is young.
Well, tell us what happened here.
We went to go and see a friend in another area.
How old?
Same age, so he's 20 years of age.
Yeah.
That area had beef, or they were involved in an activity with another area. They had war with another area. 2 people from the other area had been killed, and they wanted to level the scoring. So they come down to this area, Rayner's Lane, to find anyone. Unfortunately, my son was there.
He was nothing to do with this?
Nothing to do with nothing, you know? But it's just, we are now realising that the violence has reached a level.
What happened then?
Sorry. So yeah, they set about him, 10 people, stabbed him 10 times. He was fortunate to survive that because the neighbour that came out of the house recognised him, her uncle knew life-saving techniques. Identified a severed artery, tied it up. Air ambulance lifts him to hospital. I'm not the statistic of that parent.
And he's okay now?
He's good.
But he's presumably terrified of being on certain streets in London?
It will always, you know, he's forgone the physical side of things, but now it's the counselling to deal with the psychological impact of people attacking you. To his credit, he's been back out and about. You know, he's actually dealt with things fairly well. But the point I'm trying to make about Donald Trump and his comments, as incendiary as he can be at times, I think that comment is fair. Younger people, if you talk to them, they are in a war zone, and they are having to make decisions as to whether to arm or not arm, because the reports coming back to them as my friend's been stabbed, they've been physically attacked, or they know someone that's been killed. That qualifies for post-traumatic conversation, post-traumatic stress disorder conversations. The funding ain't there for that. The funding is not there to even fund youth clubs, let alone the level of violence.
We'll get onto this, if we may, in just a moment.
Yeah.
We're talking at the moment about why things have happened, not necessarily how you can make things better.
Of course.
We'll come to that. Ben, I know you wanted to say something, but then I want to ask you, as the nominal representative of the Conservatives, here about some of the things that have been said, some of the cuts, Theresa May's Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, etc., and Cressida Dick, the head police officer in London. But what was it you wanted to say first?
Well, I wanted to say actually that when these incidents occur, when these figures are published also, it tends to be that at the moment Conservatives blame Sadiq Khan and Sadiq Khan blames
London
austerity cuts. Statistically, we've seen a 40% rise in gun crime over the last year, 25% rise in knife crime, and these figures have started to spike around 2015. Now, austerity has really been in place since 2008, certainly 2010. You know, the 2008 economic crisis led to the necessity to make government cutbacks. So I really see this as a social cohesion problem, because when Donald Trump talks about a war zone, he's not only talking about the body count, he's also talking about an attitude of mind. Just as being discussed, you know, one area of London at war with another area of London, as the people involved see it. And of course, people that aren't in that community find that very odd. You know, London is not a city. It's not just London, but
in Liverpool, we've had stabbings over the weekend in Manchester.
But I think all of these things go to a social cohesion problem. You can look at a country like Germany, that hasn't adopted the same austerity measures as the United Kingdom and has seen a similar rise in crime.
Yeah, but if you cut
crisis.
£600 million from the budget of the Metropolitan Police, that's the London police force, and the head of this police force, Cressida Dick, says, you know, to expect us to do our own job now is incredible, and you still want us to cut another £400 million.
Well,
it must have some bearing.
I would say that cuts have, you know, the austerity cuts in general, not just relating to policing, which I think is an important point, will have had some impact, as Sadiq Khan's relaxing of certain policies like stop and search will have had an impact. But I don't think you can blame, you know, each thing for the whole picture, which is really a problem of social cohesion. It's London communities.
We'll come to you in a minute, because I think you want to jump in on what something Ben said. But
yeah, but no, I was going to say, because definitely austerity definitely has got something to do with it, a massive problem. Because, for example, even in schools, I work in schools as well, we've seen lots of cuts. So we're seeing classes are much bigger now, 35 students, one teacher trying to teach 35. We're seeing higher numbers of exclusion. And when you get to exclusion, this is where the gangs are outside. And that is one issue. Then we have, as was said earlier, youth clubs. Youth clubs are being closed down. Where are these kids hanging out? They're hanging out on the streets. And then, as we said, police cuts. There's no police out there. They're walking around.
The police budget wouldn't have affected those things.
But the police, there would have been more police on the streets. The stop and search by itself will never work as well, because this is a complex issue. We need like more youth centres. We need, and actually post-traumatic stress. Yes, we need more counsellors out there. Okay, we need counsellors, and also instead of like stop and search, we need to bring back the friendly police officer who used to be in the community, right, knowing who's in their community. Because I grew up in Notting Hill. I remember actually like playing football. The Metropolitan Police used to organise football competitions.
To put their helmets down on the ground as goalposts.
Exactly. They knew everyone. Now, where's that gone? So as a young person walking on the street now, there's no police to help him. So an innocent one carries a knife. What's going to happen? Okay, if he gets caught now, definitely going straight to prison.
Well, I think you've told a lot of the story.
Can I just bring Justin in at this point, because he wants to say something in response to what you were saying, and then please carry on.
I think it's quite magical that you can have such aggressive cuts over a consistent decade, 10-year period, and imagine it will have no impact on the people that need to access those services. First and foremost, I've worked in Felton Prison as a prison officer. I was there for 2 years. When I entered that service, I was on 33,000 a year. People that started training 2 weeks after me, so we were still virtually on the same training course, they were now being paid 17,000 a year to deal with the same incidents that I had to deal with as a prison officer. I saw firsthand from the prison sector how that affected their decisions to employ proper people that can handle the job at hand. I saw that, so I don't understand.
Is it worth blaming somebody? Because we were in a financial mess.
Hold on. It's not worth blaming anybody. It's not worth blaming.
In that case, let's get that out of the way.
It's not worth blaming anybody, but it is worth looking at things and applying the merit to it.
Okay, finding the reasons why and then looking at how to change those is what we might be best suited to do at the moment.
I think there is a blame element, with all due respect, because we suddenly discovered that when Theresa May went to coalition with the DUP, that she found this this missing money tree. We found £1 billion. Yeah. So that for things in Northern Ireland. So there is an issue here around decisions that politicians have made. And you know, I accept, you know, you were talking about things starting in 2008. You know, you had the Labour Party in, but you then had the Conservatives and the Lib Dems in for that period, and now you've got the Conservatives. And I think if you make decisions about austerity that affect the poorest people, there will be consequences.
All right, now let's look at some of the initiatives that are out there. You were taking this bus around, the bus got burnt down, you were trying to get community people together. Yeah. That's where you think, and by the way, you've got a fundraiser coming up later this year to get a new bus. How important is it to bring, how easy is it or difficult is it to bring communities together?
It's easier when the funding's there. Yeah. So, for example, I have to apply for grants and funding to go out there as a separate organisation, to go into difficult, hard-to-reach young people who are sometimes outside of education, outside of employment. So these are people that have almost been neglected by the state because they've been expelled from school, because they've got that stigma already. They don't want to join anything that has that kind of institution attached to it. So for someone like myself that's been through schooling but also been expelled, so I understand the complex issues that come with that, it gives me the credibility to go into those areas and say, look, I've been expelled as well. Violence, I understand it. If you're with a group of friends and your friends are attacked physically, you've got fight or flight syndrome at that point, and it's up to you to decide how you choose to deal with that threat. A lot of our young people are in positions where they're not in gangs, but they have friends. And if their friends are attacked with a knife or themselves, then what are they supposed to do?
What are those in power supposed to do to turn this around? What do you think?
Well, I think it is the wrong attitude to suggest that you've just got to throw more money at it. No one's saying that austerity hasn't had an impact. I'm not saying that. And I don't think the government is saying that. They're saying that austerity is necessary because actually the government didn't find an extra £1 billion to give to the DUP. They borrowed an extra £1 billion to give to the DUP. And
yeah, but they found a way of getting the money.
Well, but the problem is when the next recession hits, people are going to be saying, why was the government not mending the roof while the sun was shining? Because
okay, why didn't the government borrow £1 billion to solve the knife and gun crime problem?
Crisis. The government doesn't have the money.
Because otherwise it would have fallen apart.
I take a different attitude. I say the government doesn't have the money to give to the DUP. The government's deficit, the national debt has actually doubled since the Conservatives. But it's not. Debt is not real money. It's mortgaging the future of future generations. Mortgaging the future of future generations.
We're dancing on a pinhead here, Ben.
Well, no. I think what we're doing is we're getting to the root.
Are you suggesting, Ben, that the DUP didn't get £1 billion extra of spending?
No, I'm not suggesting that.
Right.
I'm suggesting
that is money they got.
I'm suggesting that the level of government debt is unsustainable. We have a debt to GDP ratio of almost 100%.
I'm asking you, Ben. I'm asking you what
when we have another recession, this country will collapse.
Moment to turn this around.
I think that. You can look at countries like Germany, haven't had any cuts in policing, haven't had the similar austerity measures that the UK government employed, yet they've had the same spike in violent crime. Not all crime, but specifically violent crime, just like the United Kingdom has. And I think what you've seen in the similar period of time is the migrant crisis, mass migration into the United Kingdom, and this has been going on for 20 years, so governments of all colours have not done enough.
That's a red herring.
No. I think this is a social cohesion.
Let him finish for just a second, then you've all got to.
This is a social cohesion problem, and I would agree actually with some of the things that have been said in terms of if you are going to put vastly disparate communities of people together in a very small space. London is the most densely populated place on the planet. If you don't then invest in community schemes, if you don't then build a structure so the community of London as a whole can take that strain and knit as a community, because we have a lot of what I describe as bottom-up apartheid in London, communities self-dividing, then you're going to have these sorts of problems. Okay, and no amount of money on policing is going to solve that.
Can I just say, okay, please react
to what Ben said.
What Ben said, okay, we don't throw money. Throw money won't solve this problem, okay? The money has to be used strategically. One, we do need more police on the street. That's one. Okay. Secondly, schools need more money. We need more mentors, and we need more counsellors, because we got a lot of people, a lot of young boys, okay, who haven't killed anyone, have seen their friends being killed, who are walking around, okay, and they need support. No one's giving them support. Okay. That's where money needs to get spent. Also, we need money spent with parents. Some parents, okay, one-parent family, father's not around. They're bringing up children. Okay, who is going to mentor those children and also mentor the mother? Because sometimes the mother's had a bad time in school and is trying to bring up kids. Okay, not giving them the right knowledge to love school. Okay, those children.
I won't ask where you're going to get this money from, because that's an entirely different discussion.
I'd like to know, would this situation be allowed to happen in Eton? Would it be allowed to happen in Cambridge?
Yeah.
Would it be allowed to happen in Oxford? I think you'd find the money, the resources will be found just as the money was found for the DUP.
Yeah.
Sorry, one second.
Yeah, Ben, yeah.
Also, what I'd like to explore is this unique thing that you've made between migrants that have moved in and a spike in violence. I mean, when we look at Britain's foreign policy, it's been quite violent to the rest of the world. I don't think that was because
Again,
migrants...
another programme, that's another
Another
programme.
Right, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at Scotland. There isn't a migrant issue at Scotland. Scotland was one of the most violent places in the world. One of the most violent places in Western Europe for a long time. And they've successfully turned around their scenario to have zero knife crime. So there are...
Okay, how have they done that?
Multiple agencies working together. So instead of this kind of separate different agencies, no one knows what anyone's doing, the first thing they did was bring all those agencies together.
Public health approach.
Yeah.
But Scotland has also had almost no immigration compared to England and London over the last 50 years. I don't think there's anyone that's serious.
So
but that's the point.
On the other hand, Ben, when I was a young reporter, I was covering the Bristol riots, the Brixton riots, the Broadwater Farm riots, and those were more than 30 years ago. So, I mean, that was...
Yeah, look, there's always been crime, but what we're saying now is crime is on the up compared to the past.
Talk to us about this. You're a policeman, or were a policeman. Talk to us about why it was successful in Scotland, why that sort of thing works.
Well, in some ways, Scotland, you have to remember Scotland is almost an entirely white. There's a very, very small minority population. They don't have the kind of complexity in public structures that we have in the rest of the country. And I think it was easier. So, for example, you have one police service in Scotland. You used to have 8, it's now 1. You have a much stronger link with local authorities and the police. And actually, there isn't a legacy issue with the police trust and the community. You talked about Broadwater Farm. I was a home beat on the Broadwater Farm. I could count on one hand when I went out as a young PC. When I went to my station, I can count on one hand the number of officers who didn't use the N word. I mean, I won't use the word, but didn't use the N word and the P word. That was the level, and it's not just me saying it. If you look at the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, where the recommendations haven't been implemented, so the legacy issue is really important. So I think what we need, and I'm not suggesting, Ben, that we throw money at this problem. I think we need to spend it strategically. We're all taxpayers.
Where are you going to get the money from, though? Because, I mean, we're saying austerity. Austerity was brought in for a reason. The reason is we don't have money.
Well, I'm not a politician, but, if you can find £1 billion for the DUP, whether it's it's effectively real money, whether you've borrowed it or not. We should be investing in our young people.
Yeah.
And I think the issue around schools, it is shocking when we're looking at young people's lives being lost. And the horrendous issue, the horrendous price we pay, we don't find that.
Well, we don't. Look, we've got hardly any time left, but I just want to ask people. Your family's been involved in this. Do you have hope for the future?
Of course I do.
Good.
That's the reason why I do the work that I do. But it's as been putting out, we need to work together and work in partnership and unison.
Listen, thank you all very much indeed. One suggestion was that if you're posh, Eton, Oxford, Cambridge. If you're posh, you get protection. If you're poor, you get pummeled. That's the unfortunate state of the world. The state of London's capital, described by the US President as a war zone. You've been watching Roundtable. Thank you to each one of my guests for coming on the programme. Thank you for watching. You can find us on YouTube Roundtable. Leave us your thoughts, good or bad, and we'll see you next time. From me, David Foster, and the team. Bye-bye.